Last week, we talked about the Air Force effort to develop AI fighter pilots, artificial intelligence systems so complex and capable they can manage tactical aircraft in the most complex combat situations. And according to Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall, the AI agent, as they're known, that's been piloting the heavily modified F-16 known as the X-62 Vista, is already pretty evenly matched with some of the most experienced pilots in the force. But we also dispelled some of the most pervasive myths about artificial intelligence that are peddled so frequently online, highlighting the very real limitations of current state AI. But while that episode was a bit of a primer into what artificial intelligence is and its potential implications for defense, this episode will be a crash course into the ongoing effort to get AI first into the cockpit and then into combat. Let's talk about the SHIELD AI agent that is changing the face of air warfare forever, and the Air Force's ominously named Skyborg initiative that's making it happen. I'm Alex Hollings, and this is Air Power. I've used ExpressVPN for years to help keep my data safe while traveling and using unsecured Wi-Fi networks, to make it tougher for internet service providers to harvest my family's data, and to help me gain access to websites that are blocked in the United States, like the Russian Ministry of Defense. And all of that's possible thanks to ExpressVPN rerouting all of our browsing activity through their secure encrypted servers located all around the world. But while I use ExpressVPN for a bunch of practical reasons, there are some fun ones too. Like, let's say I want to watch some Rick and Morty on Netflix. Well, here in the United States, I can't. But ExpressVPN has servers in 105 different countries. So all I need to do is switch my location to, let's say, the UK, and I'm in business. And you can be too. In fact, I can get you a great deal. Just go to expressvpn.com/sandbox with 2 X's, or follow the link in the description below to get 3 months free and all of the protection that ExpressVPN provides. Again, that's expressvpn.com/sandbox with 2 X's to get 3 free months of all that practical security stuff and the fun stuff too. Last week, we ran through the reality of current state AI, trying to cut through all the media hyperbole and social media-based apocalyptic sensationalism that's tied to the phrase artificial intelligence. Because artificial intelligence as we know it today is less a single technology and more a catch-all category for a wide variety of machine learning and automation technologies that we tend to collectively call AI, as much for marketing reasons as anything else. And while I highly recommend you go back and watch that video, what you really need to know heading into this one is that artificial intelligence systems are categorized by type based on their level of complexity and capability. Those 3 types are narrow or weak AI, general or strong AI, and super AI. Now, super AI is the sort of artificial intelligence we've been taught by movies and other popular culture to be afraid of. It's a system so complex and capable that it can conjure solutions to problems that humans may not even be able to grasp. And you won't be surprised to learn that super AI is strictly theoretical at this point. In fact, there's no hard evidence to suggest we could ever even develop it at all. Of course, that's not to say we won't one day. Then below that, we have general or strong AI, which tends to be the form of artificial intelligence people assume already exists. These are systems capable of learning new skills and applying theoretical knowledge to novel practical applications, effectively learning the way a human does across the breadth of experience. These systems, however, are also purely theoretical today, with even the most optimistic AI researchers suggesting that it may be years or even decades before such systems emerge, and some more pessimistic researchers are unsure if it'll ever happen at all. And finally, we have narrow or weak AI, which IBM describes as systems that are trained to perform a single or narrow task, often far faster and better than a human mind can, but it can't perform outside of its defined task, instead targeting a single subset of cognitive abilities and advancing in that spectrum. Now, every single AI agent, system, model, or algorithm in use today, from Siri in your iPhone to ChatGPT-4 to the agents DARPA is using to fly F-16s, all fall within the confines of that narrow or weak AI. These systems aren't capable of thinking outside the confines of the datasets and training that they're provided, and as such, are actually little more than extremely complex calculators, capable of producing output based specifically on the input that you provide. And while it might sound like I'm being dismissive of this incredibly advanced and complex technology, that is not my intention. I just want to make sure that I highlight the very real limitations of current state artificial intelligence technology, because people tend to walk into discussions about AI carrying a whole boatload of preconceived notions derived from a lifetime of depictions of AI in popular culture. Some of the most common ones I see brought up in relation to the Air Force's AI efforts are definitely Skynet from the Terminator franchise and EDI from the 2005 movie Stealth, which I have to point out is really just an updated version of Short Circuit. But to categorize those AI systems using the scale I just gave you, Skynet would be super AI, a system so complex and intelligent that it can think outside the realm of human grasp. And EDI from Stealth would be general or strong AI, a system capable of applying theoretical knowledge it conjures on its own in novel practical applications, of experiencing and empathizing with actual human emotion, effectively mimicking the performance of the human mind. In comparison to these sci-fi systems, the AI agents being trained to pilot Air Force fighter jets right now are practically calculators. They are capable of doing some downright astonishing things, but in comparison to our sci-fi conception of artificial intelligence, they are extremely limited in both scope and capability. And with that understanding in mind, let's start with the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, and their Air Combat Evolution, or ACE program. Now, this effort got a ton of media attention earlier this month, thanks to Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall riding shotgun in an AI-piloted F-16 known as the X-62 Vista, throughout a series of 10 to 12 simulated dogfights against a very real F-16 piloted by a very real fighter pilot. But this probably isn't the first time you heard about DARPA's ACE effort. It also got a ton of media attention back in 2019 and 2020 during its Alpha Dogfight trials, which saw 8 firms competing to field the most capable AI pilots through a series of simulated one-on-one, guns-only dogfights in virtual F-16s. The winner of those digital dogfights, an AI agent developed by Heron Systems, then went on to fly against a real human F-16 pilot hailing from the District of Columbia Air National Guard. Now, that pilot was known only as Banger, and Banger had a reported 2,000 hours of flight time in the F-16, and he was a graduate from the F-16 Weapons Instructor course. And as we discussed last week, 2,000 hours in an airframe like the F-16 is a great deal of experience. Most pilots don't get there until well past the midpoint in their career, usually some 12 to 15 years into their time in uniform. Now, Banger and the Heron AI squared off in 5 neutral merge engagements at varying altitudes, effectively flying straight at one another on opposite headings with very little in the way of lateral separation. The AI quickly secured 4 victories in a row, hitting Banger with notional 20mm rounds almost as soon as they closed to within 3,000 feet of one another, which is generally considered to be the effective range for the 20mm M61 Vulcan cannon on board the F-16. At that point, Banger said that he was going to shift his approach away from what fighter pilots are traditionally taught to do in air combat exercises like these, to see if that might produce a different result. And in that 5th bout, Banger did last longer, but ultimately fell just the same, giving Heron's AI pilot a genuinely impressive, undefeated 5-0 record against human pilots. Word of the AI's victory took the media by storm, with many outlets highlighting the Alpha Dogfight trials as proof that AI was already superior to human pilots. But the truth, as is so often the case, was actually a whole lot more nuanced than that. Banger's training had not been limited to finding ways to win in air combat. Importantly, it also included following Air Force regulations for air combat exercises, regarding his safety, the safety of the aircraft, and even the safety of his opponent. The AI system, on the other hand, had not been programmed to adhere to any safety protocols whatsoever, and as such, was willing to take risks that no real pilot would take, not just for the sake of their own safety, but for the sake of losing a multi-million-dollar aircraft in a single engagement. Don't get me wrong, there could certainly be circumstances where sacrificing an aircraft is called for, but if that's your default setting, you might as well be a missile. Now, that's not just my take. In fact, I've spoken to several fighter pilots about these exercises, but the truth is that was less a bug than it was a feature. And to explain why, I'll quote DARPA's ACE program manager, a pilot himself, named Colonel Dan Animal Javorcik. "We do not allow pilots to pass within 500 feet of each other. That bubble and a restriction to take no greater than 135-degree gunshots, they were violating routinely. The agents were capitalizing on precisely those limitations, which, in all honesty, is exactly what we want. The point of this exploration of what AI can do is that it can tell us and help us explore the tactic space that we just don't accept from a risk perspective." Now, this speaks to the actual intent behind these exercises, which was not, as the media suggested, to see if AI could replace humans in the cockpit. Instead, it was all about developing a level of trust between human pilots and the AI agents that will soon be flying alongside them. And in a virtual exercise, it's pretty useful to see how a human pilot might react to an AI pilot that doesn't observe safety protocols. But, and this is an important but, in a real engagement with AI piloting real aircraft, violating those safety protocols could result in the loss of the AI aircraft thanks to the shrapnel of the jet it's shooting down. So, while that tactic did work in the virtual environment of these fights, it wouldn't translate very well to the real world. And while we're on the subject of that virtual environment, the fact that these engagements took place in one gave the AI a distinct advantage, thanks to what DARPA team members called perfect state information between the two aircraft. Put simply, the AI didn't need to rely on onboard sensors to locate, identify, or target Banger's F-16. Instead, it was just lines of code running alongside the lines of code that dictated Banger's position and flight state, giving the AI near omniscience within the battle space. The AI was also not required to issue a command to fire. Instead, the system just granted it points anytime Banger's F-16 passed through the AI's weapon employment zone, or the range of the F-16's cannon. In other words, anytime it was potentially possible for Banger to have been hit, the computer recorded that as a hit. But maybe most damning for the AI agent was the extremely limited scope of these engagements. You see, the job of a fighter pilot is not just to point and shoot, but rather to manage a laundry list of simultaneous tasks, all while making sound, split-second decisions. Decision-making is such an integral part of the job in the cockpit that our good friend F-35 pilot Hazard Lee wrote an entire book entitled The Art of Clear Thinking, all about how fighter pilots' rapid decision-making processes can help in day-to-day life. I'm going to quote Hazard directly. "Boiled down, a fighter pilot's job is to make decisions, thousands of them each flight, often with incomplete information and lives on the line. The flight must be executed under the fog and friction of war, where no matter how well a mission is planned, it will change. This means that despite the immense effort that is put into planning a mission, there will always be difficult decisions that need to be made in the air, that haven't been anticipated, or that don't have textbook answers." And therein lies the complexity of the challenge the ACE program and the Air Force's Skyborg effort as a whole are facing. For a human pilot, seeing a threat, adjusting course to avoid it, and communicating that via radio may be among the simplest combat operations they'll run across. But for a thinking machine, That simple operation represents a collection of complex tasks related to data collection, interpretation, decision making, physical operations, and follow on assessments that may require coordination across multiple pieces of technology and AI control systems. As such, the Alpha Dogfight trial engagements were severely limited in scope, specifically to benefit the AI, with every engagement beginning with a neutral, nose-on merge, simply because that was the only kind of engagement the AI models had been trained for. Had Banger approached from any other angle, the fight would have fallen outside the scope of the system's training, and likely would have given Banger the advantage that he needed to take home a win. In other words, 2020's Alpha Dogfight trials marked a big step toward integrating AI into the cockpit, but artificial intelligence was still a long way off from being able to step in for real pilots. At least, then. That Heron AI agent that won this competition, limited as it may have been at the time, clearly had a ton of potential. And the following year, in 2021, San Diego-based Shield AI purchased Heron's agent and stepped in to work directly with DARPA on the ongoing Air Combat Evolution program, with the intent of continuing to mature this system's capabilities to the point where it could actually be used in real combat. And in order to make that possible, the Air Force needed to identify an aircraft that could serve as a viable testbed. And that's where the X-62 Vista comes in. This wildly modified Block 30 F-16D was delivered to the U.S. Air Force Test Pilot School all the way back in 1992, back when it was called the NF-16D Vista. Now, Vista itself is an acronym for Variable In-Flight Simulation Test Aircraft, and this unique platform, developed through a collaboration between Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works and the Calspan Corporation, included 3 Roam-Hawk computers mounted on the aircraft's back beneath the dorsal spine commonly found on Israeli F-16s at the time. These computers would interpret pilot commands and regulate the movement of the aircraft's control surfaces to allow the F-16 to simulate the in-flight characteristics of a wide variety of other aircraft, allowing it to serve as a very unique sort of flight simulator that's actually flying. Within just a few years, another unique addition to the Vista came in the form of a few different multi-directional thrust vectoring nozzles, including the 360-degree thrust vectoring setup devised by Pratt & Whitney that remains on board to this day. Now, thrust vector control allows you to orient the outflow of the engine's thrust somewhat independent of the airframe, allowing this NF-16D Vista to now perform incredible aerobatic maneuvers, and, of course, to simulate the performance of super maneuverable fighters that also have thrust vector control, like the F-22 Raptor. On July 30th, 2020, the Air Force announced that it was redesignating the NF-16D Vista as an experimental aircraft, now known as the X-62 Vista, alongside a bevy of modifications made to incorporate artificial intelligence into its flight controls. Now, because of the platform's unique open system architecture and software, all meant to support simulating the functionality of other aircraft, it was particularly well suited to adopt these new AI capabilities. And by December 2022, the new X-62 Vista boasted a whole mouthful of wild new acronyms and systems, including an updated Vista Simulation System, or VSS, provided by Calspan, updated model-following algorithms provided by Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works, and a new System for Autonomous Control of the Simulation, or SACS, designed to accommodate the inclusion of artificial intelligence agents. Now, according to Lockheed Martin, the heart of that new SACS system is the Skunk Works Enterprise-Wide Open Systems Architecture, or EOSA, which powers the Enterprise Mission Computer version 2, also known as the EMC2 or the Einstein box, that ultimately makes all the AI magic happen. And all throughout this time, of course, Shield AI continued to mature their AI agent, which they describe as a direct descendant of the Heron system that won the Alpha Dogfight trials. To do this, they used a process called reinforcement learning, a subfield of machine learning that allows AI agents to develop complex skill sets in a manner that isn't all that different from the way we humans pick up new skills ourselves. In a broad sense, reinforcement learning allows AI agents to learn in dynamic and unpredictable environments through trial and error, developing a framework to guide sequential decisions toward the best possible outcomes. The system works to develop not just the best strategy to win, but the series of sequential decisions it can make in an unpredictable environment to enact that strategy, even in the face of new variables, ultimately creating a complex skill set that can adapt to new situations, using the data it was provided and the data it has collected from previous experiences. And that brings us back to that informal explanation of current state AI that we got in our last episode from Alison Gopnik, a professor of psychology and part of the AI research group at UC Berkeley. As she explained, we call it artificial intelligence, but a better name might be extracting statistical patterns from large datasets. Now, in December 2022, the X62 Vista and its more mature Shield AI agent took to the sky for the first time, rapidly racking up a historic 17 hours of flight operations under autonomous AI control. Each flight took place with one of the Air Force's only 3 Vista-certified test pilots on board, each of whom received extensive training in the aircraft's physical capabilities, as well as the functions of the AI systems and software. Since then, the aircraft has continued to accrue hours, flying in a variety of exercises and operational circumstances, and that, in particular, speaks to the rapid progress Shield AI has made since the Alpha dogfight trials back in 2020. Remember, in those simulated air-to-air engagements, the AI could only handle fights that started with both aircraft closing with one another head-on. Now, however, Shield AI agents continue to hone their skills through a wide variety of air operations, allowing the AI to manage fights that kick off in a wider variety of ways. But, and there is always a but, as advanced as the Shield AI agents are, they still represent narrow or weak artificial intelligence, meaning they lack the complexity required to be able to think outside the confines of that narrow task set. I'm going to quote Brett Darcy, Shield AI's executive vice president and head of product. The specific autonomy that we put on there was not built to do anything civilian. It wasn't even built to fly from point A to point B necessarily. It was meant to do something much more sophisticated, but limited in that we had to reason over a highly dynamic situation. So where is the adversary? What is the adversary doing? How do I put my airplane in position to solve for both safety and weapons effectiveness? Now, in order to overcome the limitations of narrow AI, Shield AI has developed multiple modular AI blocks that can be reconfigured in a variety of ways to tackle different portions of complex tasks. An air combat operation like a dogfight, for instance, might require the use of 5 of these modular blocks, each trained specifically to manage different portions of the fight. But other blocks could be added to enable the aircraft to, for instance, meet up with an airborne tanker to refuel. Other modular AI blocks could be trained to handle the complexities of taking off or landing in a busy airstrip, with other aircraft to worry about and commands relayed by air traffic control. I'll quote Darcy again. Theoretically, we can expand it quite easily, but in practice, complexity comes with lots of switching conditions, lots of places at the seams of 2 modules where the devil in the details lie, and you have to work through that. You just have to handle more. You have to build more tasks and behaviors, so we're working through that now. The long-term goal is to develop a series of these modular blocks that, when assembled, can even receive commands mid-flight to perform tasks that weren't initially part of its pre-planned mission. To that end, Shield AI has also been working with UAV firm Kratos, flying AI agents aboard their MQM-178 Firejet drones in an effort to field a more mature version of both the AI and the drone, to eventually field a system that can fully flex the capabilities of both. And all of this will go on to inform Project Venom, or Viper Experimentation Next Gen Operations Mode, which aims to add similar AI pilot capabilities to 6 combat-coded F-16s this fiscal year. Now, those F-16s will first learn from real human pilots, flying the aircraft from the cockpit, until they eventually have developed a thorough enough skill set to fly operations all on their own. And while the X-62 Vista and Project Venom tend to garner the lion's share of attention, and for valid reasons, the overarching Skyborg program encompasses facets of dozens, if not hundreds, of AI-focused efforts all across the defense apparatus. One MIT-led effort is using thousands of hours of recorded radio banter between pilots and controllers to help AI models learn to interpret the unique language of aviators on comms, in order to better sift through conversations and identify and prioritize important messages, like runway closures. Other efforts led by firms like Northrop Grumman and SRC aim to devise AI systems that can not only root out and identify attacks on GPS guidance, but also leverage data derived from other transmission sources, or even from the Earth's magnetic field itself, to provide location tracking services even when GPS access is denied. All of this speaks to just a few small facets of the immensely complex job fighter pilots are tasked with, which means AI agents tasked with similar roles must not only learn to think, act, and function in the high-stress environments of combat, but they need to be able to do so without guaranteed connectivity with crewed assets, GPS, and more. While a human pilot may not think much of the ability to observe a threat with their eyes, use their hands to rapidly take action through flight controls, and simultaneously relay the threat and their response to other pilots and control elements over the radio, that very simple process represents a litany of complex operations, each of which require a great deal of concerted effort to devise systems capable of seeing, of interpreting, of acting, of reporting in the same manner. And that's all before adding the increased complexity of overarching operational objectives, considering weapon load, tracking targets and potential threats, and potentially leading a formation of other pilots doing much of the same. Now, eventually, AI may prove to be even more capable at all of these complex tasks than human pilots are, but getting there is going to require a huge amount of research, development, and experimentation across countless organizations. But despite the immense scale of this challenge, the Air Force appears confident that they can not only make this work, but they can make it work by the close of this decade. And that might be the part of all of this that's most difficult for me to wrap my head around. That we're not talking about a hypothetical possibility in the distant future. We're not talking about what technology could one day lead to. We're talking about systems being developed and tested as we speak. Heck, in terms of the bureaucratic drudgery of defense acquisitions, we might as well be talking about right now. The Air Force intends to field their first AI-enabled collaborative combat aircraft, or CCA drones, by 2028. They intend to have their next-generation air dominance, sixth-generation air superiority fighter flying at the center of these drone constellations by 2030. And the Navy intends to follow suit by having their own sixth-generation fighter, complete with CCA drones in support, operating off of aircraft carriers by 2035. If all this discussion about AI and fighter jets sounds like BS to you, I get it. As I researched this story, my BS detectors were going haywire because everything about this sounds like science fiction to me. But the truth of the matter is, we're not talking about the distant future. We're not talking in hypotheticals. We're talking about very real technology that is working its way to the battlefield as we speak. We're talking about the biggest and most fundamental shift in air warfare since the advent of stealth, maybe since the advent of jet propulsion, and it's coming sooner than many people think. And while I do find that to be exciting, it also makes me nervous. Because as I explained in last week's episode, we have very little to fear from narrow AI turning on us or going rogue, but we do have legitimate reason for concern when it comes to AI systems like these working exactly as intended in the hands of those who mean us harm. I'm not worried about AI taking over the world anytime soon, but I do wonder if one day we'll look back on DARPA's air combat evolution or the Air Force's Skyborg programs in a similar light to how we now look back on the Manhattan Project. If the United States hadn't fielded the world's first atomic weapon, another nation would have just a few years further down the road. It was a Pandora's box we were always going to open. But from the moment we opened it, as a civilization, we all sort of hoped we could get it closed again. And I can't help but feel like AI may be on the same track. As Admiral Christopher Grady, the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, recently said, whether you want to call this a race or not, it already is. China is pursuing this technology just as vigorously as the US is. It's a Pandora's box that is going to be opened, no matter who's first. And for that reason, maybe more than any other, this is one realm of technological advancement that I will be keeping my ear to the ground on. And with that, ends yet another edition of Air Power from Sandbox News. I'm Alex Hollings. Make sure to swing by sandboxnews.com today and every day for all the latest in news, entertainment, and motivation from all around the force. If you got anything out of today's video, make sure to click like and subscribe down below, and leave me a comment so I know what I should cover next. And of course, don't forget to tap on that bell icon so you never miss a drop from Sandbox News.